Insider Interviews. My name's Simon Taylor from 11FS, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Bonetti, who is head of development at Hargreaves Lansdown, the Bristol-based investment platform, who've recently opened a tech hub in Warsaw. Very cool. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for coming in. We'll get into tech hubs. We'll get into innovation. We'll get into all of that in a minute. But let's start with you. What is your background?
Right. Well, I am a proud West Country boy. It's where I grew up. So came along the M4 today on my tractor. Bit of a problem leaving it on the double yellow lines outside, but hopefully that's going to be okay. But like a lot of people, I left the West Country, went to university, and then spent most of my career working in London. So I've worked on the buy side and the sell side, companies like BlackRock, Barclays Global Investors, BNP Paribas. And as a lot of people do, then decided to move out of London for family reasons about 4 years ago. And I've been with Hargreaves Lansdown for about 2 years now.
Representing back in the certainly West, not necessarily full West Country, I guess, or is it classified as full West Country?
Can you call Bristol the West Coast? I don't know. I mean, I spent quite a lot of my career as well working from San Francisco. So
really?
So it's been interesting getting back to the coast.
Always the West, always near a coast.
Absolutely. There seems to be a theme going on here.
Some way, shape or form, you're getting out west. West is best, it seems. All right, so I got to know. What does head of development mean?
That's a very good question.
Are you developing photos?
Yeah, I think probably a better job title for me feels like chief cat herder. Okay. So, I mean, my real job is to look after all of our software development teams at Hargreaves Lansdown, of which there are quite a few, and very disparate range of people, very disparate range of technologies. And one of the benefits that we have at Hargreaves Lansdown is we look after all of our platform. A lot of our competitors have bought in a platform. We design, develop everything ourselves.
Oh, interesting.
So it's quite a
So
large
it's a custom build. You kind of looked at the platforms out there. Like, what was the origin of having like a custom platform? Do you know the story there? Yeah,
part of it, I think, is that we've grown very organically. I mean, Hargreaves Lansdown's background is that we started back in the 1980s. Our two founders started in their bedroom, and we've grown very rapidly from there. And so as we've gone, we have gradually, incrementally changed our technology to make sure we're keeping pace with where we need to be. For people who
don't know, Hargreaves Lansdown, I guess, is a company that, like, if I wanted to buy shares as a retail investor, as me, it was kind of one of the first online platforms and telephone platforms, I guess, to be able to do that through.
That's right. It's all about being able to invest with confidence in stocks and shares, funds, ISAs, self-invested pensions, that kind of stuff.
And so if you're in the US, you'll be familiar with Fidelity and Vanguard and other brands. This is kind of a UK equivalent of those brands.
Absolutely. And it's very much like a stealth company. Certainly when I came to HL, one of the things that struck me is that it's not very well known. It's one of those big companies in the UK that a lot of people have never really heard of.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because you'd obviously spent, 16 years in the city.
Yeah.
You're now head of development at Hargreaves Lansdown. How does spending all that time, and even in the West Coast in San Francisco, how have those roles, and can you give me a flavour for what those roles are, but how have those roles really informed what you're doing now, do you think?
Yeah, one of the strange things about me is I came to IT quite late. I'm a maths geek, unfortunately, so when I did my maths degree, I left and started out training to be an actuary, and did that for 4 years before moving into fund management. That's really the journey I took, starting on the kind of the finance side, then moving into the IT. And that's something that's been very valuable because you get to actually see really what the IT is used for. And most of my roles have been business to business. And this coming to Hargreaves Lansdown is very different because what you're actually selling to consumers. And a lot of the technology is very similar. It's all about wanting to achieve scale. It's all about wanting to keep everything safe and secure, to make sure it's simple. But actually, it puts a completely different spin on it because you have to really focus on the simplicity. You've got to think about actually how people who aren't experts in their field are really going to be able to interact with it.
Well, I guess most people that are buying a fund for the first time are not fund managers. They haven't spent their entire life. They're just trying to save a bit of money, or they're trying to think about retirement, or they've got all of these individual goals. Kind of before we get into that a bit more, though, I want to get a feel, though, because there's a cultural thing here that's pretty interesting, because you'd obviously worked in all of these roles. You've done different things. And I guess you now find yourself in Bristol. Is that different to London? What's different? Does it give you something different as a perspective as a company as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a very proud Bristolian company. With the exception of now opening an office in Warsaw, we've never looked to do anything outside of Bristol. And it's been really one of the pleasant surprises about moving out of London and coming to Bristol is finding out what a hub for technology it is now.
Because I think that outside the UK, the technology and the dominance of London, it's just seen as a one city country, but actually that's not true.
Absolutely. And, I find it quite funny when you speak to guys back in America and they assume that you are actually in London and you have to send them links on Google Maps to explain to them where you are. So yes, we obviously have the universities there. There's a lot of big tech companies. Oracle are doing a lot of stuff there. Dyson, Just Eat, and so it's really building Bristol as really a second fintech hub in the UK. And obviously, the nature of technology is it doesn't really matter where you are. As long as you're still connected to the internet, you can really do whatever you like.
And the other tech companies to cluster around is super helpful. So, how does that help you differentiate on technology? You've kind of found yourselves in a market now where fintech is a thing, right? I think when you guys started in the 80s, it was maybe a little bit different, but now we've got all kinds of robo-advisors in the market. We've got all sorts of people really innovating and pushing the edge. Do you think technology is becoming a differentiator? Do you think it helps you differentiate?
I think 100%. Certainly the one thing it gives us is the scale. We're very lucky that we're up to about 1 million clients now, and we just wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have the technology platform to be able to support it. And I think the thing that really differentiates us, and again, we're very fortunate to have, is a high level of trust. I think for some of the people coming to the market, the fintechs, the thing that they perhaps don't have, which we do, is that trust and the track record with customers, that they really understand that we have their best interests at heart and we'll always put them first.
That track record thing's pretty interesting because you don't see that many businesses in the sector of savings and investments, and especially on the platform side, it takes a long time to. It's not that you don't see them, you see plenty of them, but it takes a long time for them to get scale and traction because it's a generational sort of shift and people go to what their parents went to or to what they know and that sort of thing. But can you balance being a brand that's been around for 30 years and really push forward on tech? I'm guessing that's why the Warsaw thing, right? You're kind of trying to push further ahead.
Absolutely. And, you've reminded me of something that I found quite funny when I joined HL, that all of the people of my age and younger had never heard of Hargreaves Lansdown, but all of their parents had. For those people who are 50 and above, who are looking to retire, who have had time in their life to be able to invest, that's really the people we're appealing to now. But we completely recognize that in 5-10 years' time, the world is going to look very different. And we're trying to use technology to be able to increase our scale.
And that's kind of what I wanted to get to next. How are you positioning yourself in the market, given that your kind of awareness under 50 is always kind of challenging, but actually the world's changing, the market's changing. There's a generation of people who just aren't saving. Kind of what's the attraction to Hargreaves Lansdown for somebody? How do you start bringing people in?
Yeah, we talk a lot about wanting to make sure that, as people transfer money between generations, that they understand that we are there to make it easy for them. Certainly, that's probably one of our core values, and it's one of the things we always try and focus on. And again, that becomes a differentiator, I think, through the technology. We've invested a lot over the last few years on things like mobile apps. We already see, as again, most of people in the market will see, more and more people are transactioning business across mobile phones, and making sure that we're putting the technology in place that people are most familiar with is very important. And another interesting thing we found through customer surveys and customer experience is actually the over 50s are a lot more comfortable with using mobile technology than maybe sometimes we give them credit for.
Oh, absolutely. There was a great report that I think RFI Group did that suggested that sometimes even the over 50 may be more comfortable transacting via mobile than some of the younger folks out there. It's interesting that people assume mobile is young only, but actually it doesn't have to be. So What does this mean tangibly in terms of things that technology gives you that you couldn't do before? What are you starting to look for and see more of in terms of the future and how things develop out? Because I think seeing static images and being able to see your portfolio on a mobile app is different to being able to have a two-way dialogue and make help people towards informed decisions and so on.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the challenges that the industry has is obviously using technology makes it a lot easier for us to be able to talk to people and to tailor the service we give to them. But at the same time, there is that tension of the trust. One of our USPs, if you like, is that people know that even if they're unable to do what they want to on our mobile app or across our website, they can call up. Inside 5 seconds, they're going to get a human being on the other end of the phone. Wow. And they're going to speak to someone who really understands what it is that they're actually trying to do. And if they don't know, they will always make sure they call them back. So the real opportunity for us from technology is to make sure that we make it simple for people to engage with us, but we have that kind of analog safety net, almost, for want of a better expression. And that's where I think that we're really looking to position ourselves from a technology front. It's wanting to make sure that we use the tech to make things simple, but when something like investing, which is fundamentally a quite hard topic for a lot of people, it's still helpful to make sure they still have the human touch.
So what do you see as the challenges in the kind of shift towards kind of this truly digital or natively digital future where somebody might have their entire savings and investments and portfolio being digital? What are the challenges there and what are the opportunities?
Yeah, I think the challenges are for larger incumbent companies such as ourselves. As all companies do, we deal with legacy tech. It takes time for us to evolve that in a safe way, and that's always very much in the forefront of our mind.
You've got 1 million customers. You don't want to break that, do you?
100%. And the opportunities for us, though, I think for those companies who can just keep it simple, who can retain that human touch. So something that intrigued me, I was at the Finovate conference last week, and someone mentioned about the rise of chatbots, that they think that 50 to 80% of all client interactions are going to be done actually via a chatbot type interface. But then do we lose something by doing that? Is that really what people want? I think that the challenge for all of us in technology is to maybe not get carried away with the stuff that we find cool because we work in technology and still look at it through the eyes of the customer.
I think it's interesting. What could you do versus what should you do?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting one to play with. So both management's changing. There's a new generation of people coming into the market, as we briefly mentioned earlier. What you mentioned intergenerational wealth, you mentioned kind of people passing that on. What do you think the challenges are with a generation of people who aren't saving, and how do you activate that? How do you activate your brand? How do you start getting out there more?
Yeah, again, it's a very interesting question, and I think half of the problem is that the industry thinks in terms that make sense to them. Things like the difference between savings and investment. That's something that the industry has drawn a distinction between. But if you stop people in the street, they don't really see the world that way. They see the world in terms of, will I be richer tomorrow than I was today? Will I know that my money will be safe? And so the challenge I think that all of us face is to make sure that we can engage with those people in language that they can understand, and not to put barriers in front of them, not to force them, if you like, to use the technology that we're pushing on them. It's to listen to them to make sure we're actually giving them what they really need.
Interesting. So you find yourself in a position now where you've got the opportunity to kind of be a bit more premium, I guess, with the human side. Like having that human relationship is almost a premium offering. It's not just it's not the budget airline approach of like I'm just going to strip it all back and be as tech and as automated as possible. Because you're dealing with your money, you want to feel confident. But actually, what can technology give me that allows me to do that?
Yeah, and a great example is the things which are pretty straightforward and should be automated. Things like, I want to change my address. That is absolutely the sort of area where we're looking to invest in technology just to make it easy. But it's having that safety net that you can still apply the human touch. We can still scale that up. On very busy trading days, for example, something like Brexit, Donald Trump being elected, the markets go crazy, and we need to make sure we're still there for them. That people have the confidence that they can get onto our platforms, they can speak to someone if they need to.
There's a bit of outreach sort of thing and managing inbound, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's using new platforms, new media. There's all that kind of stuff. So what makes, when you look at kind of the next 5 years, what excites you when you're looking at the space? Obviously, you've opened the office in Warsaw. You're thinking more about deep tech, I guess. What do you think is exciting?
I think the thing that really excites me is the fact that the industry is becoming a lot more collaborative. You know, there are a lot of companies looking around themselves, looking about wanting to build ecosystems, recognizing that no one has a monopoly on all the best ideas, and certainly innovation is something that's becoming much more important to us. And we see that the way we do that is trying to actually engage with those people outside. It's quite interesting for us as a company because we started small. There are a lot of people who have been at HL since the beginning, and they remember the days when, you know, it was 50 people in an office, and they were incredibly innovative from a people financial point of view. And now we've grown, like a lot of companies who've reached our size, we're realizing that you have to work very hard to keep that innovation going. You know, and that's something which you want to try and foster yourselves, but it's also something that you have to look outside for as well. Interesting
times. So going to finish with a couple of questions we ask a lot of people. Given you're head of development, there's definitely some stuff you're going to have to do to manage your time, and I kind of want to get a feel for, like, how do you manage productivity? Like, what's your number one productivity tip?
I think my number one productivity tip is make sure you're collaborating internally as well. You know, certainly something I've learned all the way through is that if you can get 4 or 5 really smart people in a room, lock them away, let them crack on, that's really when beautiful things happen. You know, it's really to try and make sure you've got time to get all those smart people to solve a problem together.
You mean emails don't fix everything?
Well, yeah. And, you know, one of our advantages is we're all in one office. You know, a lot of my experience previously has been working for global companies where, you know, you're having a conference call with someone in Hong Kong first thing in the morning and a conference call with someone in San Francisco in the evening. We have the luxury of most of the time being able to get up out of our chair and go and have a chat, you know, and that's a big part of our DNA, and also why we haven't looked to really expand outside of Bristol historically.
Interesting. Yeah. So, what's the best career advice you've ever received, and what's the advice you'd now give?
Yeah, I think 2 things really. One is to remember that inevitably, you're often not the smartest person in the room. You know, to be open to those other ideas that people have, to try and nurture them, for want of a better expression, and also just to be open-minded and not be afraid to fail. You know, I think I can't be the only one who's taken a few wrong turns in my career, and a lot of it is about not beating yourself up over that and trying to kind of learn from your failures as much as you do from your successes.
Hear, hear. So where can people find out more about you, Hargreaves Lansdown? Where do they go?
Sure. So our website, www.hl.co.uk, will tell you everything you need to know about HL. I'm available at matt.bonetti@hl.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Matt, thank you for joining us on FinTech Insider.
Thank you very much for having me.